fantasy football waiver wire winners to consider adding to your team based off of who is available and what you need heading into Week 12. Second round rookie Zach Charbonnet took over the lead back role for Kenneth Walker III, who suffered an oblique strain. Zach Charbonnet was already trending up in his snap percentage. He finished Week 11 with 21 touches and most significantly 6 receptions. Jordan Love finished Week 11 with his 4th week over 20 fantasy points and his 5th game throwing multiple touchdowns. Season high 322 passing yards. Jayden Reed, the second round rookie, caught all 5 targets for 84 yards and a touchdown back in Week 10. Then he caught 4 of his 6 targets for 46 yards and rushed 3 times for 46 yards and a rushing touchdown in Week 11. So that's 19.4 and 19.2 fantasy points in back-to-back games. And Matt LaFleur was quoted saying on Jayden Reed, "He is a dog. He's a war daddy." I don't know what that means specifically, but I think it's a good thing. Odell Beckham Jr. caught 4 of his 7 targets for 116 receiving yards in Week 11. He scored touchdowns in both Week 9 and Week 10, and in 3 out of 5 of his last games, he's earned 7 targets. 14.6, 11, and 15.6 fantasy points across the last 3 games. 15 rushing attempts for 45 yards and a touchdown in Week 10. Then he rushed 10 times for 73 yards along with 4 receptions in Week 11. Ty Chandler is currently behind Alexander Mattison, but his touches are going up, and he just had over 100 scrimmage yards. Alexander Madison's been inefficient this season. They try to bring in Cam Akers to take away some of the work, and Ty Chandler might just be earning more and more touches weekly. Demario Douglas, the 6th round rookie, caught 6 passes on 9 targets for 84 yards in Week 10 before the Week 11 bye. 6, 7, 7, and 9 targets across the last 4 games is looking like he is the Patriots wide receiver 1. This may be dependent on Cooper Kupp's ankle injury, but Tutu Atwell opened up the first 3 games of the season, scoring 15-plus fantasy points in all of them with Cooper Kupp out of the mix. He's had 4 weeks of 8-plus targets. 3 catches for 115 yards and a touchdown in Week 11 for 20.5 fantasy points. Khalil Shakir also had 92 receiving yards back in Week 8. He's out-targeted Gabe Davis in 2 out of 3 of the Bills' last games. Josh Downs has been dealing with a knee injury, so the hope is that the Week 11 bye did him right when it comes to his health. 5 weeks of 13-plus fantasy points as the Colts wide receiver 2 equals flex value. He's had games of 97 and 125 receiving yards this season. Rondale Moore earned 8 targets in Kyler Murray's first start back in Week 10. He only earned 1 target in Week 11, which is slightly concerning, but it did end up being a 48-yard touchdown. Moore has also had 20 rushing attempts this season. Back-to-back weeks with 7 targets for Elijah Moore, and he's hit that in 7 games this season. Elijah Moore led Cleveland in receiving yards in Week 11, 15.4 and 12 fantasy points the last 2 weeks. 2 receptions for 44 yards and a touchdown, showing that receiving yard upside tied to what his prospect profile is. Jameson Williams scored 12.4 fantasy points in Week 11. He's a former first-round pick who should be an explosive playmaker. Let's just hope he can find some consistency and grow in Detroit. Michael Thomas sustained a significant injury in Week 10. Rashid Shaheed earned 9 targets in that game. Shaheed has had games of 19, 18.3, and 24.3 fantasy points this season. 3 receiving touchdowns in games of 89, 85, and 153 receiving yards this year just shows flex value. 15 touches in Week 10 before the bye for Ezekiel Elliott for 88 yards. 3rd game with 11-plus rushing attempts. Worst case scenario is he is a solid handcuff for Ramondre Stevenson. We'll have to monitor the arm injury, but Darius Slayton caught 4 passes for 82 yards and a touchdown in Week 11. He's consistently playing most of the snaps and seeing targets, and has a history of receiving yard upside. Shout out to my Fantrax coworker Colin McTammany. Plugging Isaiah Likely with Mark Andrews out for the season. The next 3 games are solid tight end matchups. Mark Andrews ranked top 15 in red zone targets and leaves behind a 21% target share. Likely has averaged 13.7 points per game with Andrews out in 2022. And then if you want to pause this and read through it, I have some running back stashes along with some dart throw tight ends to consider picking up if you have the space in your roster. As we get closer to the fantasy playoffs, stashing some running back handcuffs can be beneficial if, knock on wood, someone gets banged up. And then at some point, tight ends that are streamable become guys that are weekly starters. So I feel like this is a good list to consider if you are needing one of these two categories.